And greetings and welcome to the QCast. It's a very special episode because it is episode number 100 of the QCast. Thanks for everyone that's been along this 4-year journey on the QCast. It has been a blast. And when I started realizing a couple weeks ago that episode 100 was coming, I wanted to find a really special way to celebrate episode 100. And I'm very proud of myself that I think I've landed the perfect guest. And when I think back to why I'm a Division III basketball fan and why I do a lot of things I do following and promoting Division III, it all comes back to this gentleman. Folks, I'd like everyone to welcome Coach Denny Bridges, the former men's basketball head coach of the Illinois Wesleyan Titans, the former athletic director, a 3-sport standout athlete at Illinois Wesleyan. And Coach, before I go through some more superlatives, it's great to see you. And did you ever think you'd be doing a podcast? I mean, is this your first podcast? Have we done other podcasts? Just say hi to everyone, Coach.
Well, hi, everybody. And Bob, thanks for having me. I think this is my first podcast. I've watched a lot of them, but this is my first participation.
Well, it's so great to have you here. And I'm so excited to talk about the Titans. At first, before we get into your story, I think I'm pretty excited about what I'm seeing from the women's and men's teams, Coach. So the women yesterday beat Rose-Hulman. I thought played well.
They did, and they play Washington U this afternoon. Maya has been really good. She had a tough loss, I think, to Hope last week, but otherwise, they're really going to be good.
The Whitewater game, I think that was
that was the game. The Whitewater game was the game we had won and just kind of made mistakes at the end.
Yeah, some turnovers that led to Whitewater baskets. But I think you'd agree with me that the addition of Ava Bardick, who's a Division II transfer, in combination what they already returned, they have so much talent on the perimeter, and they play that Maya Smith defense. I feel like they have a really good chance to contend in the league this year, Coach. Do you feel the same way about the Titans?
I do too, and I think we all know that Milliken's tough, and
Yep.
Milliken has one outstanding player. So I think it's going to come down to us or Milliken.
On the men's side, I'm also feeling very good about the progression that I'm seeing. You know, certainly losing the home game to Mary Hardin-Baylor didn't play great for a lot of that game. The Marietta game had a stretch that was rough, but the Wash U game and then the game last night against Chicago, which was a tough one. What are your impressions of the men's team so far, Coach?
The game at Washington U the other day was maybe the best I've seen us play in a couple of years. We dominated everything. We out defended them. We out hustled them on loose balls, and we hit our shots. You know, in basketball anymore, if you're hitting your shots, you're pretty good. And last night it was just the opposite. We started off, couldn't make anything, and Chicago hit 2 or 3 threes from the corner, and so we were kind of fighting our way back all night. But Chicago was better than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, they were picked, I think, 7th in the UAA, but that league has become great, and I don't think they're going to finish 7th in the UAA. When I watch them play, I believe they're going to do really well. I also wanted to ask you, I've been meaning to ask you this for a long time. What's it like to sit up there and watch the Titans play? This is mostly a men's basketball question. Since you retired in 2001, is it hard to watch? Like, do you find yourself like, why are they doing that, or why are they doing that? Like, what's it like to sit up there and watch after you coached for so long?
I find myself being a bit analytic, and I like to watch what the other coaches are doing to try to counter what we're doing. It's a different world now than it was in the day, but it's exciting, and I love to be at the games.
And I know everyone appreciates you being there. And you know, when you walk in the Shirk Center, I think you're one of the first people that everyone knows exactly where to look for. And there's Coach Bridges, which is a comforting feeling. Wanted to also share before we kind of get into your story a little bit. For context, Coach won 667 games. He won 421 in the CCIW. 421. That's a 765 winning percentage on the 421, by the way. He won 17 CCIW titles. The next closest is Gray Giovanni with 10. So 17. He was in the NAIA tourney 7 times, in the quarters twice. NCAA Division III, this is amazing, 14 times in 18 years. A record of 30 and 14 in D3 tournament games, 3 Final Fours. He won the 1997 Division III title with his Titans. And maybe most importantly, he produced a boatload of first team academic All-Americans. And Coach, I wanted to start with you. We just talked about the back end of it, but how in the world does a kid from Anchor, Illinois, 3-sport standout, how does a kid from Anchor and Octavia High School end up going to Illinois Wesleyan? Let's start there.
Well, I guess as a kid growing up, I was a big University of Illinois fan. Maybe you were too. Pinckneyville, Illinois, where you grew up. But University of Illinois didn't call when I graduated. And so it kind of got down to between Illinois Wesleyan and Illinois State Normal University. And Coach Horenberger came to my high school banquet and offered me a half scholarship, suggesting that I try all 3 sports. I look back and I wonder why I thought a 5'9", 160-pound athlete thought he could play 3 sports. But in the summer before my freshman year, I was playing baseball in Normal with a bunch of ISU players. I was a high school senior, and there were some ISU players on our team. And they were kind of trying to talk me into change my mind. And I went home and talked to my dad about it. And thank God I had a dad that was wise enough to say, hey, you gave Coach Horenberger your word, you stick with it. And turned out to be my life.
And, it's very rare now that someone would play 3 sports in college, but you were a standout basketball player. One time I tried to call you a point guard and you corrected me real quick and you said scoring guard. So you were someone to call you a scoring guard, Coach. You scored 926 points for the Titans, which is a bunch. So you were a great basketball player, 4-year letterman. You were a great baseball player, played shortstop. I believe you were a 4-year letterman on the baseball team. Football, you were just a 3-year letterman, and you were an all CCI. I don't think the W was in it back. I think all CCI quarterback for the Titans. How did you balance, Coach, your time playing these 3 sports at Illinois Wesleyan? That's unheard of today.
Well, the first couple of years, I didn't balance it very well because I look back and think of the pitfalls that could have flunked me out of school, because I spent a lot of time on the road with the teams, and I spent a lot of time at practice, and I didn't spend a lot of time in the botany lab. And the first 3 semesters, I really skated by. So, and I can't imagine Coach Horenberger being able to hire me as a coach if I'd flunked out or gone ineligible.
Let's talk about Coach Horenberger. I grew up hearing about Coach Horenberger. My father played for Illinois Wesleyan. As you know, he was in the class before you came. He would have graduated in 1957, and you came that next year. And so I grew up knowing who Coach Horenberger was, and I remember meeting him my first weekend on campus as a freshman. We were just walking through the student center, and that was the first time my dad had seen Coach Horenberger in years and years. So I have an appreciation for what he means to Illinois Wesleyan. I'm curious though, what this is a loaded question, but what did Coach Horenberger mean to Denny Bridges?
My life. I played my final baseball game in my senior year, and I was walking back up to Memorial Gymnasium where our locker room was. And Coach stuck his head out of his office window and said, "Hey, schoolboy, wait there. I want to talk to you." So he came down and we sat down on the steps, and he said, "I've got an interview for you for a coaching job at Plainfield High School. I want you to go up there and get a couple years experience. And then as soon as the president will let me, I'm going to bring you back to coach the Titans."
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, here, I never coached a game in my life, and Coach Horenberger's offered me a head coaching job at the school I love. And I wasn't very successful at Plainfield High School. The first 2 years, I was like 10 games under 500 both years. I got to wondering maybe if Coach would change his mind. My 3rd year, we were pretty good. We were something like 17-9. And when that phone call came one evening at Plainfield that he was going to bring me back to coach, it was just like handing me my life.
As a coach, playing for him, how would you describe what type of basketball coach Coach Horenberger was?
Fast break. He loved to get the ball out and go with it. He refused to play zone, which I inherited a little bit, but I kind of gave in and used the zone once in a while when you really needed it, like in the national championship game. But I can remember we did a lot of drills where we outletted the ball to half court to try to beat the other team down. he actually was 52 or 53 years old when he hired me, and he was having a lot of trouble with tension headaches. It didn't seem to bother him in baseball, but it bothered him a lot in basketball. So he was trying to escape that. In fact,
Right.
he didn't even watch the games I coached.
I know.
He would sit in his office or go outside and walk around because he didn't want to have that tension. And me winning that game, me and Illinois Wesleyan winning that game meant as much to him as him doing it.
Right. I remember that very vividly is that coach was around all the years that I was around, and he was too nervous to be in the Fred Young Fieldhouse or later the Shirk Center to watch the games. So you're at Plainfield High School as part of an agreement to go up there and kind of learn how to be a coach. You get that phone call. Were you coach's assistant for a season?
For one season.
Okay.
And that was very valuable because I was able to be on the bench and watch him close up, how he handled the team. And then when I became the coach, I was 26 years old, and I had a couple of guys on my team that were 21, 22. So there wasn't much separation.
Right.
But Coach Horenberger gave me a team that couldn't fail. I mean, we had 4 seniors, and we had won the conference and had just missed the NAIA playoffs. We lost to Lewis at home in coaches last year. So the next year, when I inherited that team kind of changed me from being a under 500 high school coach to a conference championship national tournament coach.
Right.
And
he left the cupboard full for you. That's what you're saying.
He did. Absolutely, he did. And I was watching the other day. Actually, I was in Colorado and drove up to Golden, Colorado to meet Dale Legal, one of my former players from Oswego. It's kind of interesting. Here I am, an 84-year-old former coach, and he's my 79-year-old former player.
That's great.
But we were talking about what a magical season that was, that we won that championship, went to Kansas City, won our first game, upset Midwestern Texas, the number 3 seed, the second game, and then lost to Georgia Southern in the quarterfinals.
What do you remember about that group that you inherited? You mentioned visiting with one of the players, but was it difficult? I'm coaching transitions, and I've been around a couple with Illinois Wesleyan. I've seen transitions can be difficult. Was everyone bought into Denny Bridges because you were there and you were a Titan and you were part of Coach Horenberger's staff for a year? What was that like, that transition?
It was not totally easy. Dale Legal, for example, let it be known that as a senior, he just as soon finished with Coach Horenberger. So when we walked off the floor in Kansas City after losing our last game, he walked up and put his arm around me and says, "Coach, it was great playing for you." And that made a big impression on me because I won him over. I actually didn't change much with what Coach Horenberger was doing. I ran his offense. I played man-to-man defense. So I didn't try to reinvent the wheel. I knew Coach Horenberger was a good coach, and I had played his style of basketball. It was interesting how things have changed, how Division III and the way Division III used to be. I don't think our players or most Division III players understand how Division III has changed. Division III has now kind of morphed into more like Division I.
Right.
I looked at a photo the other day on your website or on your Twitter of the team getting on the bus to go to Wittenberg, I think it was. Now, here's a charter bus, 18 players, 5 coaches, trainer, manager. The day we went to Lewis to play, there was 10 of us. I had 10 players and myself driving 3 cars. I think we probably stopped at the Manor Hotel, which is one of Coach Horenberger's favorite eating places up near Shanahan. And when we got to the game, I taped the ankles. And we played. Then when we went to Kansas City, we jumped in 3 cars, drove to Kansas City to play. We lost the last game on Thursday, drove home on Friday. On Monday, 5 of those 10 guys were with the baseball team going to New Orleans. The other 5 guys were all in fraternities, a couple Teaks, a couple Phi Gamas, a couple SIGs, and they went back up on campus to go to the Fiji Island party and Sigma Chi Derby Day, all the things they did. As a basketball coach, I decided I needed to go recruit. I needed to find out if I could recruit. And at the same time, I had to coach my tennis team.
Wow.
because I became tennis coach.
Right.
And actually, the first tennis match I coached was the first one I saw. But now it's all in basketball, and that
Right.
starts in high school with all the sports, or all in volleyball, or all in soccer. The players have team lifting with the coach. They have team videos. They have preseason practices, open gym. I actually didn't see my players until October 15th, because for the first 5 years I was backfield coach.
Right.
So it's just an entirely different world.
It's a totally different world. I agree. It's not better, it's not worse. It's a totally different world for sure. Yeah, the Titans have what, 4 or 5 assistant coaches this year. And like you say, everyone's got multiple full-time assistants, and it's just a different world. Your first recruiting class that was yours, would that have been like, I'm getting the years, like Tommy Gramco, or like who was in the first class that was the Denny Bridges recruiting class?
Well, I recruited Dennis Cagle from Octavia, from my high school, and he went to LSU and got down there, and there was a hurricane, and they had a lot of hazing, and he called me and asked me if he could come back, and he did. So he was my very first recruit. The next class was Tom Gramco and Barry Swanson, Shelley McMillan. And then the class after that was Sheldon Thompson.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the transition from a really good team to another really good team, when we had Tom and John Gibson and Stan Brewers and Fred Evans joined that team. So you seem to have a star or two, maybe lose them, and then you had to go out and get that next star.
Right.
And almost every time I was able to find a star, because my mantra was always, get off the bus with the best players if you want to be a good coach.
And I quote that about 20 times a month in Division III. Coaches, I just said, coach used to say, get off the bus with the best players. And that, to me, that was always the simplest way. I heard you say that a million times. And I'm curious, how did you do it? Because we're going to get to some more recruits that happened a few years later. But I mean, now, I'm not saying it's easy now, by the way, but now you've got Coach Rose that can send Coach Etheridge to this game on a Tuesday. And you could send, this coach here and this coach here, and Coach Rose can go here. As far as I know, you were the only guy that was recruiting. Like, how did you do this solo for all of these years? You had some help later, but how, in the early years, how did you do that?
I was a letter writer. There was no cell phones. There was no instant way. I was in the car a lot. I mean, I would leave practice at 4:05 and head for the suburbs to see a game. Later, when Dennis Martell became my assistant coach, he was baseball coach also, so he had other responsibilities. But often I would send him out to see a person just to say yay or nay.
Right.
Is he good enough you need to go see? And then when you ran into a really good one and you had to babysit him, go see him play 5 or 6 times, I kind of wonder how my wife Rita ever did it, because I was never home. I was just never home, because you didn't have video scouting then. So I wanted to scout every team we played. So I would be driving to Kenosha, Wisconsin to watch Carthage and Carroll play, just to get a feel for those games. But recruiting was hard. You had to first of all find out if the kid was a good enough student. And if he was, as I drove home, I was always thinking, who else wants him? If I found out that Eureka wanted him or Monmouth wanted him, I mean, there's no aspirations on those guys, but if I found out that he was thinking about a big school, then I thought maybe I need to work hard on him.
So that was one thing that has always struck me about your recruiting. And I think that in our current status, our best recruits are those guys, which is it's guys that are getting recruited at a higher level, whatever that means back in your day versus, I guess, Coach Rose now, if it's someone that Lewis really wants, or Quincy, or maybe Eastern Illinois is talking to him or something like that. I mean, you were never afraid. You always believed, I believe in your heart, Coach, that Illinois Wesleyan was the right place for that kid. And I thought that was a big part. Is that fair to say that you believed that they belonged at Illinois Wesleyan?
Well, I believe that they could play championship basketball there. If a kid always had to fight the idea that he wanted to be a Division I player. And I would say to him, well, if it's Duke, or if it's North Carolina, that's one thing. But if it's Eastern Illinois or Western Illinois, I would say, can you imagine a Final Four of North Carolina, Duke, UCLA, and Eastern Illinois? You're not really going to a Division I school. You should come to Illinois Western, where we have a chance to win championships.
That is such a big takeaway for me, is you always were in on those kind of kids. Wanted to spend a second before we get into kind of the 70s a little bit. The Illinois State game, January 13th, 1970, which it was great to see you at Redbird Arena. And so that game has now been played for the first time in 53 years. We didn't play well. I'd like to play that. I'd like to do that one over. I think we could have played a lot better. But the game back in 1970, I don't think people realize today how intense that situation was. Just kind of walk us through like the lead up to that game and what that game was like.
Well, Illinois State had always been a big rival. You know, we wanted to beat Millikan, we wanted to beat Augustana, but we had to beat Illinois State normal. It was the game. And all of a sudden, Milt Weisbecker was their athletic director, and he was hiring Will Robinson to be their first black head coach, and they were going to go Division I. And all of a sudden, he calls Coach Horenberger and says, "We're going Division I. We don't have room for Illinois Wesleyan on our schedule." And it caused a lot of problems in town because everybody thought, let's wait and see if they can play. And believe it or not, I was a little outspoken about that, about how they shouldn't be dropping us because we could compete. So we finally decided to play that one last game at ISU. So it was everything. I mean, it was everything. And we were the better team, but we didn't play very well. And luckily, Tom hit the last shot for us to win.
What was that? Was that the post game? I've seen an old video from 1970, black and white. And the cool thing about, you've got the WJBC audio with it. The Titans are mobbing each other, and you could actually see people piling. I mean, what the post game must have just been like nothing else. Is that right?
Well, you see people crowding out on the floor after a game, but this was special. I mean, the people were jumping over the rails, coming down from upstairs. And of course, there were a lot more Illinois State fans there than there were Illinois Wesleyan, because they were 6 or 7 times bigger than we were. But like I say, I didn't think we played great that night, but we were able to win. And then people were asking me earlier this year, how do you feel about playing them again? And I says, I really don't care. I mean, it's a different world.
Yeah.
I know this, we would never play them for fun. I mean, there was never an exhibition to it. It wasn't being playing for fun. It was for all the marbles. And so I didn't think we played very well when we played out there a couple of months ago. And we didn't shoot well. And when you don't shoot well, you don't play well.
Right. Want to move into the 70s a little bit, where, really the decade, I think, that kind of launched, I think, Illinois Wesleyan basketball on a national stage. And obviously the place to start would be with the recruiting of Jack Sikma. That whole class, I want to talk about the whole class of 1977 just as a group, but start from the beginning with, how did you first come to know about Jack Sikma, and then how did you go about starting to recruit him?
Well, the backstory is that Augustana had Bruce Hamming and John Lang, 2 7-footers, and they were beating up on us. And I told our missions director, Jim Rudy, I said, hey, if you guys are out there and if you see any kid that's over 6'9" and he can walk and chew gum, let me know about him, because I got to find some size. So a routine memo came from the admissions office. There's a kid at St. Anne, 6'9", Jack Sikma. He's a 27 ACT. So I wrote Jack a letter and asked him for his schedule, and he answered the letter. And that didn't always happen. And so that Christmas I was recruiting. I went to the Aurora tournament. I went to the Pekin tournament. I went to 6 or 7 different tournaments, and I came home planning to go to Chatsworth to see Jack. And I laid down on the couch, and my wife Rita says, Denny, I thought you were going to Chatsworth. I says, God, I'm out of gas. I'm not going to go. And 15 minutes later, I'm at the hall closet getting my jacket. And she says, where are you going? I says, this kid, Jack Sikma, returned my letter. I'm going to go to Chatsworth to see him. And they treated me like a big-time coach that night. They set a folding chair up at the end of the gym so I could sit down at the gym level and watch him play. And God, he was truly 6'9". He was so skinny, but he could hit his shot. And he was such a competitor. Late in the game, there was a guy from the other team shooting a free throw to win or lose the game. And Jack's standing behind him, and he's clicking his fingers, miss it. You could see him mouthing, miss it, miss it, miss it. So driving home, I thought, God, if I could recruit this guy. In fact, I told Coach Horenberger the next day, Coach, I saw a kid play last night. If I could recruit him, he'd be the greatest player in Illinois Wesleyan history. So as I'm driving home, I thought, boy, there was something in his letter. What was it that he said in his letter that got my attention? So I drove to my office because I keep those letters in a drawer. I dug through that drawer and found his letter, and he says, I have a sister that goes to Illinois Wesleyan.
Oh, boy.
I thought, wow. So the next day I took her to lunch, tried to find out all I could about him. Happily, she was a nursing major, studying hard, liked it. She told me she didn't think that it would make any difference that she was there or not there. Jack was a pretty independent guy. He would make up his own mind. So I became relentless. I went to every game. I wrote him a letter every day.
Wow.
But the key was your fraternities, the Sigma guys. I invited Jack to campus 2 or 3 times. And the point I was making was, when you go to Illinois Wesleyan, it's going to be a lifestyle. It's not basketball. It's going to be great basketball. And I told him we opened with St. Bonaventure, and I guarantee he's the only player I ever guaranteed I would start him in the first game.
Wow.
And I said, you'll be jumping center at St. Bonaventure. It was so intense. And one day I saw his sister on campus, and I said to Suzanne, how are we doing with Jack? She said, oh, Coach, I don't think we're doing very well. I think he's going to Illinois. I said, God, he can't. He just can't. So I called Rita, and I says, do you need the car this afternoon? She says, yeah, I kind of do. I said, well, you got to find another way, because I got to go to San Antonio. So I called Jack, and I says, hey, Jack, I'm coming up this afternoon. Let's go play golf, because he was a golfer. For a small town kid, 6'9", he liked to play golf. And he says, Coach, I can't play golf. I told my dad I'd help him lay carpet. So I says, okay, I'll come up and help you lay carpet. You and I help your dad lay carpet. He laughed. He says, no, I can't do that. He says, but if you come up late afternoon, he says, maybe we can sneak off. And I really think that night, after we played golf, we went to a local restaurant, a little bar, and had some cheeseburgers. And we were sitting in his driveway, and he says, you know, Coach, everybody else is trying to give it to me, and you're asking me to pay for part of it, and I can't make up my mind. That ought to tell me something. Pretty perceptive for a 17-year-old kid trying to make up that. When everybody's telling him that he can go to Champaign and play in the Assembly Hall and play in the Big Ten, and I'm asking him to come to the CCIW and play at Fred Young Fieldhouse, it was pretty daunting. But the last thing he said when I pulled out of the drive, he says, Coach, don't stay away too long, because the last guy I talk to always sounds best. So, of course, I was calling him every day, and I was playing golf, and I came home, and Rita says, Denny, what's the best thing could happen to you? And I says, Jack Sikma would come to Illinois with it. And she says, he is.
Wow.
I said, oh, Rita, don't lie to me about something like that. She says, no, she says, he called, and he said, tell Coach to call me. And Rita says, well, Jack, do you have a message? Because he'll be scared to death. Jack says, just tell him I've got good news. And so he ended up coming to Illinois Wesleyan. And it was all because when he visited campus, he was just another fraternity party guy, having fun, doing more than basketball. When he went to visit Illinois with Harv Schmidt and the coaches there, they guided him around campus, didn't turn him loose at all. And he has said to me recently at one of the Sikma tournaments, Coach, I don't know how you did it. But I said, well, you're the one that made the big decision. You know, you're the one that had to go against the grain, because everybody expected you to go to Illinois, and he did. And then I had Bobby Spear, who was a all-state player from Quincy, captain of the Daily News all-state team. Mike Bradley, an all-state player. And I got those guys to make up their mind early, so I could tell Jack,
right,
I got a couple all-state guys coming. And then, of course, we added on to that. We added John Linhan, who transferred from Wisconsin back. We added on Mike Rinker, who transferred back from Rollins. We added Jimmy Molinari, who transferred from Kansas State. And it was a great class. And we were just okay Jack's freshman year. He he hurt his finger in a sledding accident and missed about 7 or 8 games. But then the next 3 years, I was at the Sikma tournament this year, and they honored the Final Four teams.
Right.
And from my perch up there, a couple of fans walked by and says, "Okay, coach, which of those teams is the best Titan team ever?" And I says, "Well, the best Titan team ever isn't in the house tonight."
That's always a great debate over some beers after a Titan game. And I'm smart enough to tell a younger fan that, yeah, there's no team that you're gonna see that could play with the one in the 70s with Jack Sikma. It's a different era. Do you think, Coach, that something like that is, in my opinion, isn't going to happen again? A guy that's good enough to go to a Division I school, a major, and play. There's all kinds of kids in Division III now that are good enough to play Division I somewhere for sure. But the Jack Sikma story, could you ever see something like that happening at any small school in the country?
I don't think so. But the closest would be that kid from Williams.
Yeah, Duncan Robinson. Yeah, Duncan Robinson.
Then transferred to Michigan. And with the transfer portal, there may be a stepping stone for them to do something like that. But I did everything I could to showcase Jack. I mean, we played like 10 Division I games on the road at Florida, right, Medley, at St. Bonaventure, DePaul. And in all those games, Jack really performed. He really played well. Yeah. And then, of course, the Sikma Move was magic for him. He learned to give himself some space to operate. And the most important thing is when he turned and faced, he could hit that shot.
Right.
I've taught it to other guys who could turn and face and couldn't hit that shot.
Right.
But it all worked out, and I was right. He did become the greatest player in Illinois Wesleyan history. What I didn't know was he was going to become a 14-time NBA All-Star, a Naismith Hall of Famer. Here's the concept for you. In 1977, his last 3 games probably were at North Central, maybe at Millikan, maybe at Carthage. 1 year later, in March, he was playing at the Lakers, at the Suns, at the Timberwolves,
right,
and with the Washington Bullets. So he was always able to adapt and take his game to the next level.
I'm always I've gone back and watched some of like the 1979 championship Sonics team, and just thinking to myself, like, yeah, 2 years before this guy was playing games at Millikan, and here he is in the NBA Finals. He had a huge game, like the clinching game. He may have had like 15 points and 10 rebounds. He had a huge game. And so it's an unbelievable small college story. The Sikma Move, before we move on from Jack, the Sikma Move, I've heard Jack talk about the Sikma Move and how much you were involved in that. Did you see that he was very skilled and he could shoot. He didn't have like a low post move. Was the concept, we need to get you something down there, or how did that start?
He wasn't a low post player in high school. He played out on the wing, shot the ball down in front of his face. And so the first thing we needed to do was get that ball above his head where he could shoot it where nobody could reach it. But they crowded him with the smaller centers like 6'3", 6'4". They would just crowd him, and he would pivot into him. He was always too close to him. And actually, down around Collinsville and Pinckneyville and down in the southern Illinois, there were some coaches that used the inside pivot for clods, for big, tall kids that weren't very good, to keep them from making mistakes. So I had Jack try it a couple of nights in practice, and boy, he was pretty good at it. And my biggest contribution was recognizing, hey, this is going to be really good. So every night before practice, I would feed him 100 times from the left side, 100 times to the right side. And about every fourth one, he would put the ball on the floor and take it to the basket. He had to take an unnatural move and make it into a natural move.
Right.
And he just got so good at it. And then I tried it with a few other players. I tried it with John Linehan, and he had a little bit different interpretation of it. He would just move from side to side, but it helped him. I tried it with David Caldwell.
Yeah, David Caldwell, yep.
but David couldn't quite get the rhythm of it and wasn't quite as strong as Jack, but he used it some.
Yep.
And then by the time Billy Braxton came along, Billy pretty much had his own power move that he developed at Division I. And so, but in Jack's case, he turned an unnatural move into a natural move, and it became even effective against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah, that's the thing. You could go on YouTube and just, the Sikma Move, and just hundreds and hundreds of times where he's doing the move that you and him worked on at the Fred Young Fieldhouse. And because it is a tough, when he faces, you're shooting a baseline 7 or 8 foot jump shot, which is not an easy shot. You have to be a really pure shooter. And then he was so good at, the drive, and then he could finish on either side. A lot of times it was a reverse layup on the other side where he finished. It really did take incredible skill to be able to do it. Before I leave that era, just a couple questions. I've become friends with Bob Spear in the last 5 years through the Sikma tournament, through Twitter. Was Bob Spear always the character that he currently is, Coach? Like, what was Bob Spear like as a student and a hooper at Illinois Wesleyan?
Well, first of all, he was a student. And
I know that.
His decision wasn't as much a basketball decision as it was a life decision, because he wanted to be a doctor. And so he had to go to a school that would recognize that you had to go to class, couldn't miss labs. And there would be weeks where he would miss 2 practices a week. I would practice after supper sometimes so he could go to practice, because he had to go to Dr. Criley and Dr. Franzen's labs. But Bob had that wit, that quip. There were times when I would walk into the locker room and he would be in mid-sentence and he would stop talking. But for example, Jimmy Molinari transferred, and they became best friends, roommates. And when Jimmy became eligible at mid-year, we were playing at Carroll, and he hadn't played. It was near the end of the first half, and Jimmy hadn't played. Bob came out of the game and he yelled to Jimmy, "Jimmy, I thought you were eligible." But he got his ultimate dream of being an anesthesiologist, very successful.
You're right.
And has been a loyal former Titan.
Very loyal, and he'll be out, I believe, at the California games at Cal Lutheran. He's done a lot of great things to support Coach Rose and the Titans. So yeah, he's been a great guy. I always knew of Bob Spear, but now that I know him a little bit better, he is quite the character. The other question I want to ask you before I move a little more to the 80s is, most people today, Coach, don't realize what the NAIA was like back then. As I study it and look at it, it certainly was way, I don't mean this in a disparaging way above what Division III is now in terms of the talent level. I think it was more like somewhere between the uppermost part of Division II and the lowermost part of Division I. When you guys were in those NAIA tournaments with Jack, those teams you were playing, just give people a little context on the level of play in that Kansas City tournament.
Well, it was just below Division I, and as we played in our season, we were trying to win the CCIW, but we were the only NAIA team in the league, so we had to go by the CCIW, no scholarships. We never really thought, until Jack came along, we never really thought we had a chance to win out at Kansas City. Getting to Kansas City was the win, if you could just get there, because you had to beat Lewis or Eastern or Quincy to get to Kansas City. And then when you got there, you had to play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and win 5 straight games against teams like Tennessee State, Kentucky State, Grambling, Alcorn State, Henderson State, which became a big nemesis of ours because we lost twice to Henderson State out there. When Jack was a senior, we were seeded number 2 and legitimately thought we had a chance to win. But Jack got 4 fouls in the first half against Henderson State, and I kind of got caught up in the officiating and forgot to coach my team a little bit. And that was a big disappointment, because the only other team we had out there that advanced was my first team. when we got to the quarterfinals and ultimately lost to Georgia Southern. But Kansas City was a big goal, and I wouldn't have given it up. At the time, Division III was playing their championship at Potsdam State or at Augustana.
Right.
And I would say, when people ask me why we didn't go Division III, I says, well, I don't want to play my championship in Rock Island. I wanted to go to the Kemper Arena in Kansas City, and knowing that I probably couldn't win it, that we couldn't win it. But it was just a mantra to go to Kansas City. And then, of course, when we decided to go Division III and we made it to Salem, and that was another thrill. So Salem turned out to be every bit as good experience as Kansas City, and it was doable.
Right.
You could win there, but you couldn't have. We probably could never have won at Kansas City. They were just too good. Willis Reed and
right,
Earl Monroe and
right,
great players.
In the Division III era, somewhere in 1983, I think the men's basketball program officially became Division III, and I assume that you kind of had to get your lay of the land. Like, how quickly? I mean, you were playing in a conference that was all Division III, so that was easy. But nationally, did you have a sense for how things worked, or was there a transition period when you got to Division III?
There was. I didn't have the feel for at all. I know we went to Whitewater the first year, maybe to a tournament, and I kind of didn't even know how many more steps it was to get beyond that. And we came so close so many times. We lost at Maryville with the Surjack, Keel, Martin team, and we lost at Ripon one night with a country
St.
team.
Thomas, 1990 St. Thomas with David Kunka
we
and
lost
Jeff
to
Keel.
DePaul, and we were up 5 with like 2 minutes to go and lost. So we got on the. We lost to
Ohio Wesleyan.
Yeah, we lost to
Lemoyne Owen. How about Lemoyne Owen? Did they beat us?
Lemoyne Owens beat us in Memphis. We lost to Steve Alford's team at here
Manchester
at the Shirk Center.
Yep.
So we came really close. So the time we actually beat Washington U in Roanoke to finally make it to the Final Four, that was a big barrier to get by.
The night before that, Coach, I didn't make it out to Roanoke for the Sweet 16 because I figured, well, if we win 2 games, I'm going to come back to that same town to the Final Four. But I remember being at the pub too, and Brian McNulty and I going out to his car to listen to the Titan game. And we were playing Roanoke, and we kept adjusting the I can't remember, WJBC. We kept adjusting the radio because it sounded like we were up 40 or 48. And we're like, so at halftime, Coach, I think we were up 50. What in the world?
47.
Up 47. What
70 to 20, 70 to 23.
What happened at Roanoke? It was in their building. They won their league. They're a great team. Talk about the Roanoke game for a second.
I felt sorry for Paige Moyer, Roanoke's coach. He was a great person, a great guy.
Great guy.
Had a conference championship winning team. We played an absolutely perfect half. We hit every shot. I remember one time Brian Crabtree stole the ball, went behind his back and dunked. When we get to the locker room at halftime, we're up 43. And I said to David Steinberg, I says, we can't play any of our regulars the second half. For one thing, I'm not going to do that to Paige. And the other thing is, what if somebody sprained their ankle?
Right.
So we started our second 5 and played the second 5 the whole second half. And actually, they scored the first 8 points of the second half. And I said to Dave, we're only up 39. But then the next night, Washington U was really tough. They had a really good team.
Yeah,
and we were able to beat them and then return the next week to Salem. And Rowan got a tip in at the buzzer on us. I remember somebody asked a fan down there if Rowan could beat, or if Williams could beat Rowan. And the guy says, no, Rowan just beat the best Division III team I ever saw because they had beaten us the night before.
That Rowan team, obviously, they were unbelievable. that's the type of team you won't see now in this year of the 5th year and the transfer portal. You could construct something, but you'll never again see a collection of 4 or 5 really good Division I players playing for a Division III team. But coach, that game, I've watched it. It's on YouTube. I've gone back to watch it. I was at the game, and my memory when I watched it on YouTube was just the same, which was it was an unbelievable game. It was 2 different styles playing. It comes down to a guy, Demetrius Poles, who just tips the ball. It rattles around and goes in. Was that a you had worked so long to try to win a championship? Was that a crushing moment when that the game ended about 10 seconds later, but when the buzzer sounded and we lost to Rowan, was that a pretty crushing?
It was, because there's a difference between first and second. The difference between being a national championship and being a runner-up is just dramatic. And to have that, to come that close and not make it. What was really amazing was we had 6 good seniors on that team.
Yes.
And Brian Crabtree. And as we're at the airport the next morning getting ready to fly home, I'm listening to our younger players, Brent Nieberge and Brian, and they said, hey, let's come back next year and win that. And I thought, boy, I looked around at Chris Simich and John Litweiler and Brady Knight, TJ Posey and Scott Peterson. And I thought, boy, there's a lot of these guys aren't going to come back next year. And we happened to recruit a guard named Corey Kuhn to go along with Brian Crabtree and guys like Brent Nieberge and Matt Hoder and Andy Boyden, who really never got a chance as young underclassmen. Went back to Salem and won it. And it was kind of an unbelievable thing to do.
It was, and I remember, I'll never forget this. I've told people this story a lot of times, and you wouldn't remember this. It was just a passing moment in your life, but in about early November of 1996, I was at the Shirk Center, either playing basketball or working out, and I saw you were putting. So you had started practice, season hadn't started. You were putting, and I said, Coach, are we going to be any good this year? And I remember you said, Q, I'm probably too old to coach the kind of team that I'm going to have to coach this year. I don't know if I could take, an under 500 season. And, but you did say, you said, I really like a couple of my freshmen. There's this little kid from East Peoria you're going to like. And that's the season that ended up being a national championship. Of all the teams that you had that knocked on the door, you have this team that's Brian Crabtree, who was the player of the year without question, a great freshman. And you had some really great JV players, Brent Nieberge and Matt Hoder and that group. When did you know in 1997? When did you know that you had a good team?
The first game, because we went to a tournament at Washington U, and it was just like we had reloaded. We weren't rebuilding. We had just reloaded, and Corey was great. And of course, Brian, like you say, was the best player in the country as Division III player. And so I think we started out, we won our first 15 games or something like that. And so there's always a moment, though, like in our Rose-Hulman game in the regionals when Brian made that fantastic shot from behind the basket. If that doesn't go in, end of story. Over. So yeah,
it is pretty amazing that you win the national championship. Had Brian not made what was, urban legend, people say he was behind the backboard, like he had to shoot it around the corner of the backboard to go in. I do know that. It wouldn't have ever come to be. So sometimes this game that you coached is just a matter of a bounce, which is really unbelievable. The Division III, those Final Fours, and then you get to another one in 2001. Looking back now, I believe that you knew, no one else knew. Did you know that was your last year in 2000 when you were going to Salem in 2001? Did you know that was your last games as a coach?
I did, but I was so caught up in what we were doing that I kind of forgot about it a little bit. Maybe I suppressed it, and maybe I was kind of having second thoughts, because boy, that run from in the playoffs that year to beat Grinnell.
Yeah.
Then go to Wartburg and win a conference championship there. Go back to Chicago and beat Elmhurst, our conference champion, and beat Chicago, who was the #1 seed.
Incredible.
it was John Camerdell had gotten hurt. I kind of think it that night when I'm walking back to my room, I'm saying to myself, "Are you sure you want to walk away from this?"
Right.
But I really wanted to kind of do like Coach Horenberger did, not leave the cupboard bare. Coach Horenberger left me
Right.
a lot of good players, so I was leaving Luke Caston and
Seth Hubbard and Camerdella, Salagi, Starkey, right?
So I felt good about that, and but I'll tell you, the first 2 years, I guess I kind of got a little therapy by writing a book.
Right.
I kind of started writing that. Dunk only counts 2 points, and that helped a little bit, but it was a tough 2 years. But then once those guys graduated, it wasn't that hard at all. I mean, then I was working on being athletic director and keeping the Shirk Center going, and but that first couple of years, it was hard.
In the and Scott Trost is a good friend of mine. I think very highly of Scott Trost, and I think that was an interesting 5 years. How Scott won 3 titles, got to a Final Four. He recruited 3 first-team All-Americans. The decision to hire Scott, I know that was a big thing for you, but this was your baby. It had been handed to you by Coach Horenberger. How was Scott Trost the guy when you retired?
He was a good coach, and he did recruit that one great class, but I don't think he was really ever excited about recruiting Division III. I think he really missed the having athletic scholarships to hand out.
Yeah.
And so the team that he left Ron Rose really wasn't very good. We just didn't have many players. And actually the team that went to the Final Four for him got 4th in the league.
Right.
Isn't that right? Didn't the Adam Douches?
They were 9-5. Yeah. They were, and 2 of those wins were overtime. Right.
Yeah. Douches hit a half-court shot against Elmhurst.
Correct. That team was almost not in consideration. Right. They started out maybe 12-0. And then when Scott leaves, so now you're back at it, which I know you didn't ever plan to be when you retired. I don't think you thought 5 years down the road, or 6, whatever it was, that you'd be back at hiring. And I know you had a great candidate pool, and you hire Ron Rose. So what was the deciding factor then when you hired Coach Rose? Because I know that you had a lot of people that wanted that job, but why Coach Rose? And I'm glad you made that decision, by the way.
Well, I'm not sure he was a favorite going in. I thought to myself, maybe it's good if I don't do so much of this. If I have Kim Nelson Brown and Norm Esch and a committee that kind of helps me with this. It just kind of evolved around, though, that his Illinois Wesleyan ties, the fact that he was an Illinois Wesleyan person, that may be the most deciding thing that got Ron the job. And he's done a great job. We've been competitive every year. He recruits well. One of the things that he's done, and I know part of it is that he has a lot of help doing it, but he's mined the St. Louis area.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever had a player from St. Louis.
Right.
And now we have a pretty steady flow of good players coming from there.
Yeah. What I would say is I really enjoy the program that he's carried on, because he's got the same kind of kids that you did and Scott Trost did. And they're good basketball players, but they're good people and they're good students. He's continued to produce academic All-Americans and good people that go on to do great things. And so I think you've made 2 good decisions. And another one of your great hires as athletic director is Maya Smith. Won a national championship in 2012. Talk a little bit, if you would, about the job that she has done with the women's basketball program.
Well, I guess Maya's hire would be one of my great successes, because she wasn't a basketball coach. She wasn't a college basketball coach. Right. She was a softball volleyball coach from Monmouth College. And so when she came over to visit, she said, I'm a basketball person. She had coached at Carrollton High School for 16 years. So I kind of leaned on that. And for one thing, I wanted to hire a woman. I really thought I think it's important in women's athletics if you can, if the resumes are at all close, you ought to hire women, give women a chance in the world of coaching. And also, I think they relate better to female players. I think there's a little bit of an emotional thing tie with women players. And Maya has been really good. She's a competitor. She runs that ball press, and her championship was unbelievable because not only did she win the championship, she won it while she was taking chemo for breast cancer.
Right.
And like our championship with Brian Crabtree, she had Olivia Lett, who was an outstanding player, to help her win that championship.
Yeah, Olivia was the player of the year, parallel there. And she's done an amazing job with her program. Just a few more topics for you, Coach, that I want to get to before I let you go. And thanks for all your time. The CCIW has been a great small college league to be a fan of and to follow because there's stories, there's rivalries. Yeah, every night out, you're going to Elmhurst this Wednesday, and you got John Baines, and you got a history of what's happened there over the years, and you think back to the great players, the Ryan Newples of the world, and what was it like? Just talk about the CCIW. It was the CCI. There was no W in it when you started, I believe. But talk about the league a little bit and what it was like to compete in the league.
Well, the thing that stands out most to me about the league was how good the coaches were. I mean, I went through coaching against a bevy of really outstanding coaches, starting with Lee Fund at Wheaton. Lee Fund won a national championship when it was big colleges, small colleges. So he won it when it was Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois. He won 4 straight CCIW championships, 14-0, 14-0, 14-0, 14-0. Jim Borcherding. Augustana. Borch had the Hamming and Lang team, and I think he applied for a job like at Drake or Iowa State or somewhere. He didn't get the job, and they told him, well, you haven't proven you can coach, recruit, or win with African-American players. So Borch went out and recruited Shane Price and those guys and won a championship with African-American players. Most volatile coach on the bench I've ever seen. I saw him do a forward somersault off the bench onto the floor. Dan McCarroll at North Park. Really understood what kind of a school North Park was and where he should get his players. Got a lot of players from the city, some transfers into the city. Bosco at both North Park and Carthage. And Bosco was a good coach. Good game coach, hard worker. Joe Ramsey at Millikan. Joe was mined that Decatur area and got all the good players from down around Decatur. Played behind the post and deep and let you get it into you, but didn't let you do much with it when you got it in there. And then later, guys like Bill Harris and Gray Giovanni.
Yeah.
They were at the end of my career, but they were really outstanding coaches. And I think John Baines has done an outstanding job at Elmhurst.
He has.
You hear the names you hear John Baines recruit from over in Indiana, and you just never heard of him. He mines some kids that you wouldn't think maybe were going to be players.
That North Park, the three-peat team that won the national championship, 78, 79, 80. Just talk about that group. I never saw that group. I've seen some video from the Final Fours for that team, but those North Park teams must have been pretty incredible.
They had the one great player,
Michael Harper,
who played in the NBA for 2 or 3 years. I don't remember who did we have playing against them at that time.
Yeah, you had just come off. This would be the seasons right after Jack Sikma graduated, so it would have been the 3 years after that.
So we were still NAIA then.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
So I don't remember their route because I was not involved in that. But to win 3 national championships was something. And didn't Bosco win the 3rd one?
Bosco won 2 of them. He won the 85 and 7. And I think, Bosco, I've run into him in gyms for 30 years now, between North Park and Carthage. And then since Steve is now at Carthage. And He really seems to be one of the guys like you that's been a advocate of the CCIW forever. Like Bosco, he's very proud of that, that no team has gone undefeated. And now it's like 51 or 52 years. Augie's team back 70, whatever. That's like no one has, all these teams that have done great Final Four championships. Bosco's really been one of the advocates for the league, coach. He's kind of been one of the league characters.
Oh, he has, and he did it the right way. Actually, that team with Tom Gramco and Fred Evans and Sheldon Humphrey, we were 16-0 in the league.
Right. And then Augie was right after that, maybe, right? And then that was it. No one's gone undefeated since then. That's unbelievable to me.
Yeah, even our Sikma teams, I think we're 15-1, 15-1, and 15-1.
Crabtree was, 13-1. The next year's, yeah, we've had lots of 13-1s, and Augie with the Gray Giovanni run, Bosco's national champs. So it's been an amazing league. One final topic, coach, and then I'll ask you if we missed anything here. But the facilities that you were part of getting done while you were the athletic director, the Shirk Center, I believe that was opening of 94, 95, the first game there that we almost lost to Aurora.
Oh, yeah.
Big Chad Hudson and Mark Aubrey made some shots. But the Shirk Center and Jack Horenberger Field, to talk about just how proud you are of the facilities moving from Fred Young Fieldhouse, which to this day, coach, I tell people that was basketball. That smelled like basketball. It looked like basketball. Amazing place. But the Shirk Center has been so special. And what was it like to be part of all that when it happened?
Well, it was kind of a sad day, the day I stood out in Kelsey Street and watched them tear down Fred Young, because there were 30 good years of exciting basketball there. And it was good for basketball, but it was bad for everything else. Bad for locker rooms, bad for every other sport. And so all of a sudden, Coach Horenberger had this great relationship with Russell Shirk and Beer Nuts. And we were told now that we're going to build a new athletic facility. And so I wrote a planning document in preparation for architect selection. And the thing that I wanted more than anything else, the thing that I was going to demand more than anything else, was that we build a basketball arena as close as possible to Shirk Center, or as to Fred Young, and a running track in another room.
Right.
Because the prior generation of athletic centers had a basketball gymnasium with a track running around.
Yes.
Augustana's was that way.
Right.
North Central's was that way. Every place we visited was that way. But the reason they did that was because they only had to build one room. And I also tried to point out that we're moving into an era of women's athletics, and women's athletics was just growing like crazy. So you had to build for two. You had to build twice as much. And I kind of threw in a practice gym as a bargaining point. I thought, boy, it would be nice to have a practice gym. And then I thought there was going to be some bartering. I thought, we're going to start deciding we got to cut some things.
Right.
So maybe I'll throw that out. And if I have to cut it, I'll cut it. The good news was our president at that time was Minor Myers.
Right.
And Minor was a bit of a spender. Our budget was $15 million, but in the run up to the plans, at the committee meetings I went to, the hundreds of meetings I went to, I don't ever remember anybody talking about money.
Wow.
We talked about building what we needed that would fit on that land, that spot of land. And Hastings and Chivetta was a great architectural firm, and Tony Chivetta was a good guy to work with, and it turned out fantastic. It was the impetus for a lot of other schools to start doing things.
It was.
Carthage did it, Wabash did it, Illinois College did it, Wheaton upgraded. Everybody needed to do that. I remember Steve Yount at Augustana. We had a coaches meeting to showcase the Shirk Center. He didn't want to come. He didn't want to see it because he knew that's what I was going to be showing recruits for the next 20 years. And I kind of felt that same way about the Carver Center.
Sure.
When Augie built the Carver Center and I walked in and saw you walk down into that arena, I didn't like that because I thought,
right.
Kids are going to be attracted to this. And so I'm really proud of that. And then Russell Shirk came back to me, Jim's dad, and said, okay, what do we need to do to finish the job?
Right.
So that was another $5 million from him, and raise a little bit more and buy 13 homes and build the Jack Horenberger baseball field, which ended up helping with a new soccer field, redoing the track, building the softball field. And so we have Division III facilities that are as good as any.
And they've stood the test of time, and they've done a good job of upgrading. They've built on, they've replaced floors, the video board. So it looks to me, when I walk in that place, it looks like it is brand new. And people say that to me all the time. It's like, this place was open in 1994. It really does look brand new to this day. Just a couple more things, and then we'll let you go here. 1997 national championship game. Never asked you this. How did you decide to play a zone? Nebraska Wesleyan is a shooting team. I would think the last thing you'd want to do against a team with all those shooters would be set up in a zone. You play a zone, which I don't remember. I don't remember that season well enough, Coach, but I don't remember us playing a ton of zone. But you're up 21 points at halftime using the zone. Like, where did that decision come from?
Riding in the bus on the way out to the arena. I knew they shot well, but what really stuck in my mind was how comfortable they were in their man-to-man offense. They ran a screen down that teams couldn't seem to recognize, and they were clearing their shot in rhythm. So I thought maybe if they were shooting other three-point shots, not the ones in rhythm, but there was no dramatic commitment. In fact, I told the players in the locker room, we're going to start in zone until they make their first shot. And then we're going to go back to man-to-man. So I was really kind of milquetoast about that. And happily, they went about 4 or 5 possessions without making a shot.
They did.
So the mantra in the huddle was, hey, we're going to stick with this because it's working. And at the same time, we were scoring at the other end. And I remember one of the Nebraska Wesleyan assistant coaches after the game said, that damn zone. And we had actually a 19-point lead at halftime. Chad Ideas made a 3-point shot from the corner.
That's right.
To take it from a 22-point to 19. And I wanted that other 3 points because I knew that they would come back at us. And I think also without Andy Boyden,
yeah,
we were down one man. And then when
Matt Hoder
broke his foot, John Baines fouled out. In that game, Corey Kuhn played 39 minutes. I think Brian Crabtree played 37. Brent Neve played 36. Nathan Hubbard played 36. We were stretched as thin as we could. But then when they got it down to one, boy, the happy thing is sometimes it's hard to get back, but it's hard to get all the way back. And Nebraska Wesleyan wasn't quite able to do it.
It was unbelievable game. I'll never forget. You think, well, we're in a zone, and it worked, and it was unbelievable. One more for you. My Denny Bridges starting lineup, and you can comment on this or not. If I was going to take a group of Titans to play the Illini, I think, and again, I wasn't there for much of your era, but I would have a hard time not trotting out Corey Kuhn, Blaze Bajaski, Brian Crabtree, Jeff Keel, and Jack Sikma. Am I off at all, Coach, in the team that I want to take over to Champaign? What do you think about my starting 5 there?
You're pretty close. You're pretty close. I love them all. The one that we probably haven't talked about is Blaze.
Yeah,
Blaze was really good. He was the 5th round choice of the Washington Bullets, I believe. I don't know. Would you leave Bill Braxic off to have another 7-footer? Would you leave David Caldwell off? Would you leave Dean Gravelin off? Would you leave Tom Gramco off?
You got a pretty good bench on your team, is what you're saying. Is no matter what way you want to start it, we've got a good 10 to send over to Champaign, I think.
Yeah, and they would do well because first of all, we'd have the best player with Jack Sikma. So
absolutely, we would. Well, Coach, there's a million things that I could ask. We could do this all day, but really, really appreciate your time in doing this. And let me just turn it over to you a little bit. Is there anything we didn't cover? Anything that you'd like to say to Titan fans, Division III basketball fans, anyone that's tuning into the QCast? Let me turn it over to you, and then we'll close it out here.
Well, Bob, I think one of the things that needs to be recognized is that the public or the publicity around Division III athletics has changed. Everything around here used to be the Pantograph and WJBC, and that's virtually gone. I mean, the Pantograph stories are 2 days late. We never hear anything on WJBC. So your medium, the internet, and the job you do for Division III is kind of the lifeline now. And the older generation, the old ancient fans of my era, sometimes aren't quite tuned to that yet, but the younger generation are. And so keep up the good work.
I appreciate that, Coach, very much. There was one thing I wanted to read in closing. This was from A Dunk Only Counts 2 Points, and you had listed kind of you had an evolving list of keys to building a team or keys to winning. And I believe the final list that made it in was winning is achieving good team feeling, players liking and trusting each other. 2, winning is a coach trusting his players. 3, winning is confidence, knowing how to win, expecting to win. 4, winning is having someone to win for, someone who cares, each other, family, our fans. 5, winning is a coach defining roles, making certain that players know how to accept their roles. 6, winning is players fighting hard to be in the mix, earning meaningful playing time while unselfishly pulling for teammates. 7, winning is a coach not trying to keep everyone happy with practice or game playing time. 8, winning is working on defense, quote, though I worked on offense 80% of the time. And 9, winning is talent. I guess that would be the get off the bus with the right players. In closing, Coach, that's a list that you made several years ago. There's a lot of coaches that'll listen to this QCast. Is there anything about your list of keys that you would expand on for anyone out there that cares how Coach Bridges did it?
I guess the only thing is you listed number 9 as winning is talent. I think maybe that should be number 1.
Absolutely. It's a great list. I've read that often because I think it applies to way more than basketball. It applies to whatever your occupation is. Folks, that was the 100th episode of the QCast, and it was an honor to have Coach Denny Bridges with me today. Coach has meant a lot to me and a lot to Illinois Wesleyan University over a long amount of time. Coach, this is a pleasure, and we've got a big ball game today. So the Titans versus WashU. We need to get a W in that one. I hope to see you real soon at a Titan game, Coach. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Q.